Namaste, everyone.
Namaskaram all,
I'm Simple Raj.
and I'm simply Lulu. Welcome to the second episode of our podcast.
We're calling this episode Simlingo. And because we are Simple Raj and Simply Lulu, we are simplifying simulation terminologies for this episode.
Oh, I just like that, Raj. And you know what's the favorite comment I received following our first episode? That this podcast is simply awesome. so, so I'm very happy with the feedback and the comments we're receiving. And based on that comments, we decided to do this podcast where our audience want to know a few terminologies related to simulation.
That's right. So, this is an on request podcast, to be honest. We got a lot of comments, we got a lot of insights about what we're doing well. And we did feel because the whole goal of this podcast is to create awareness on simulation, it is right to talk about simulation terminologies. And mind you, this episode might drag on to part one, part two, and maybe part three as well. But we'll start with the very basics. Lulu ma'am.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. So, the basic terminologies we come across when we use the word simulation based training or simulation based education within the healthcare context, one we listen to is task trainers. So, they are either called part task trainers or PTTs or task trainers or simply trainers. So when we say task trainers, and because our modus operandi is to keep things simple, task is a procedure what we are doing, a skill procedure. Normally we use the task trainers, and trainer is the product on which we are doing this procedure. Just to keep it very simple, so it's basically PTT, a part task trainer, is a part of the body, human body, or if you're talking about veterinary simulation, a part of the animal body, on where the learner practices certain tasks or procedures. So, an example of as simple as putting a needle in your vein, or as we say, IV cannulation. So, we have a IV arm, which is a part of the body where veins will be there, arteries will be there, and whatever procedures we want, whether it is cannulation of the veins or cannulation of the artery, as simple as that. And the most common for our non healthcare community is where we teach them chest compressions during CPR. We have a half body. So that's also a chest compression task trainer. Most of these task trainers are simple, they're efficient in a way because they're more affordable. But nowadays, there are a lot of complex task trainers that come which give us feedback in various form to tell the learner that you are poking in the right place, or you're giving compression at the right depth, or with when we talk about very complex task trainers which even have a computer screen, usually used in the surgical or dental procedures, that feedback is also given. So that is to let you know what task trainers are. And as a completion, Raj, I'm just going to continue with the word mannequin, spelled as MANIKIN or MANNIKIN or MANNEQUIN. It again depends on which simulation dictionary you're following, or which cultural context you're coming from, or whether it's the British or the US English. So this
Ma'am,
mannequin, yes,
if I
Raj,
may pause for a
yeah,
second.
yes,
Because you mentioned healthcare simulation dictionary, I
yes,
have to bring this up.
okay,
So now we are also referring to a dictionary while talking about these definitions,
hmm,
and that happens to the healthcare sim dictionary version 3.0. Um,
yes,
Now, this is a dictionary which is brought together by several agencies, input from several agencies,
hmm,
principally the Society for Simulation Healthcare from the United States and the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. But it's an open resource document, it's a living document available online where you can refer to and get your terminologies right. And as I said before, both me and Lulu ma'am are also using this as our base reference for our definitions. And because ma'am mentioned mannequin, This was a new learning outcome for me as well when I first saw this document recently, that the healthcare simulation dictionary spells mannequin as Manikin. That's it.
Yes, Raj, thanks so much for bringing that up. And I think for our audience, those who are not very familiar with the societies or the dictionary, I think we can put up the link of this open document in our comment box on the YouTube channel, if
It'll
that's
Yes, ma'am.
possible.
We can. It'll be there in our description.
Yes, thank you so much, Raj. So, coming to mannequin, I'm not going to use any complex word here, but it's basically a full blown. I'm talking about patient simulation. We are not going much into the veterinary science, but it's like a full blown realistic animal or a full blown realistic human being, and in various age groups, whether it's a newborn or a child or an adult or a pregnant woman or an older lady, an older man. So there are various options available. Now, some mannequins are just dolls. They don't have any electric or electronic systems in them. But even then, we call low tech mannequins. But even then, these are very, very potential products, which, based on the scenario we are creating, we can actually make it very realistic uh, without spending so much money. And at the other end, we have really high end, high tech mannequins with electrical and electronic systems and with modeling where, one parameter like your heart rate or blood pressure changes, and automatically the whole system behaves like how our physiology changes. So these are the high tech mannequins, usually operated with computers and softwares. And these are the two types I want to discuss. And both, whether it's your low tech mannequin or your high tech mannequin, both can be very, very efficiently used to do a simulation, as we mentioned in our first episode, of creating or mimicking or amplifying a real time clinical environment and immersing our learners with these task trainers and mannequins. These are the most commonly used products when we talk about simulation. And advances are lots, and Raj is the expert here. He's our tech genius, so I'm not going to touch upon what's happening with that end. But just to break the monotony of my speaking, I just want to tell Raj to give his inputs here on. I have a very low tech mannequin with me, and I am teaching my learners, even my non healthcare community, on just a simple, if you see an accident on the road, how are you going to transfer the patient or do a log roll, or how are you going to do a splinting? So I want a little realism there for my low tech mannequin. And Raj, can you help me out? If it's a road traffic accident and I'm teaching my passerby on how to stabilize or transfer this victim to, the ambulance he has called for, and I want to make it realistic, so I'm going to teach them with this low tech mannequin. How can you help me make it more realistic?
So the first thing I would do is call you and ask you, ma'am, how would I make this more realistic?
Okay, how will you make my low tech mannequin look really realistic? Okay, so that my learner is like, oh my god, it's bleeding, oh my god, he has so many injuries. So how are you going to make my low tech mannequin look like that?
And that brings to my French associations in Pondicherry, which is a word called moulage. So
Yes.
moulage means makeup. Moulage means a property of sorts that can increase realism in a mannequin. Now, Lulu ma'am was more experienced in moulage than I am, but essentially, moulage uses simple makeup techniques, simple jugaad, Indian jugadu techniques, use colors and food powders and food ingredients to make wounds and display wounds on plastic surfaces of the mannequin. Ma'am?
Yes, thank you so much, Raj. So we won't be going into the technicalities of moulage. And now my learners standing in my learning environment, my safe learning environment, where Raj has very nicely done a moulage on my low-tech mannequin with some bleeding and some scratches and abrasions, and he's going to really think, oh my god, I should do something to stop the bleeding. Oh my god, I should actually do this to transfer him without any spine injury. So this is how the realism is done, and moulage is an excellent technique for simulation educators. Moulage is actually a 1 or 2 day workshop, and based on the feedback and comments, we can actually have an episode on that. So thanks, Raj, for the moulage part. Now we are going to have a bystander or a passerby, just coming and standing and enacting the role of somebody, so that my learner gets a little more realism and a little more information which my low-tech mannequin can't get. And that
Mm.
brings me to the terminology of SP.
Mhm.
So again, SP, different organization across the world, different definitions. So SPs can be a simulated person, it can be a simulated patient, it can be a standardized patient, it can be a simulated participant. So, whatever definitions you are following, this is for the healthcare educators. In simple language, it is a human being, a person who is an actor, who we have oriented and trained to enact the role of either a patient or the patient's attender or a nurse or a technician or anybody, a human being who adds more value to the scenario we are creating for our learner, which will help the learner achieve the objective. So, this is just in simple, I want to talk about an SP. Anything you want to add, Raj, in this?
Uh, so, and like you said, ma'am, an SP adds to the realism of the scenario. He could be somebody within the scenario. He could be the patient himself, or he could be somebody who we put in the scenario to help us run the scenario. Does
Yes.
that make sense?
Yes.
He's like our guy. He's our confidential inside man. So I put him in the scenario amongst the participants. They don't know he's on my side, but he helps guide the scenario without the instructor actually getting into the scenario where it's happening, because that takes away the realism. If an instructor is just standing there in a simulation and guiding the students, that doesn't make it real. They don't feel like they're immersed enough. Whereas my SP, my guy, when I put him in the scenario, he feels and pretends and acts like he's part of their team, but he's running the scenario. He's pulling the strings of the scenario, so to speak.
Yeah, very nicely put, Raj. You know why? Because, as an instructor guiding the scenario takes away the realism. So, our guy, the SP, whether he's the patient or the bystander or any simulated participant who is on our team, who we have trained and oriented earlier, so that he knows how to stick to the learning objective and to help out the learners or to challenge the learners based on how the learners are proceeding with the scenario. So, that's very nicely put. Most of these are actors, especially in our Indian setting, because this podcast is for our Indian audience. Right now, we don't have a exact paid pool of SPs. We are making shift with our people in and around our healthcare. Abroad, they do have a whole set of SPs who are very formally trained and paid for their services, and some of the SPs are actual patients who mimic the actual signs and symptoms, and sometimes they even give feedback to the learners and they also assess the learners. So that's just taking one step ahead. Now, Raj, I just want, we have our mannequin, we have our SP, and there are two different modalities of our simulation uh, field. Now, if we club various modalities, we come out with what?
So yeah, this is an important point that you brought up. So because we're combining two or three modalities, we're putting two or three things together. It's going to be called a hybrid simulation. Am I right or am I
Yes,
wrong?
you know what?
That
I actually feel like, oh my God, am I doing a Viva here? Let me see if my mentee actually knows what we're talking about. But yes, Raj, it's hybrid simulation, and whatever modalities we use, as the scenarios become complex, within our limited resources, we can combine the modalities. And the most common modalities, as you mentioned, we are going to combine as one of our task trainers and one of our human actors, because only human beings can emote as well. So whatever said and done,
Mm.
how much ever we spend money on our equipment, nothing is as real as a real human being. That we all admit. All simulation educators know that, right, Raj?
The best simulator is a human simulator.
Yes. So the emotions and the emoting part is actually very nicely done by our human actors. So we combine so that we don't have to actually poke a human actor, but we might keep a task trainer and dress him up in various innovative ways so that a learner will feel that they are talking to a real human being, a patient, which is the case because our actor emotes and talks like human being. But at the same time, the learner is doing invasive or poking, as in simple terms, either putting a vein or putting a urinary tube or putting a tube in the nasal. Anything is not done on the actor, but it's done on our task trainers. So this is the most simple way of putting across hybrid simulation, Raj. Is that right? Anything
That's
else?
correct, ma'am. Yeah. So, ma'am,
Yeah.
I also want to digress for a second because again we'll
Yeah.
miss it later.
Yeah.
You mentioned this bystander and lay rescuer,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Yesterday, while watching the American Heart Association rollout,
mhm.
they've pivoted to using the term lay rescuer rather than a bystander because a bystander
Okay.
just implies a person who's standing by the side. So
Very nice.
they've pivoted to using the term lay rescuer for all non-healthcare providers providing first aid or BLS.
Yeah. So
Just
we
a
don't want.
additional point.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. So we don't want anybody to just stand by there. We
Exactly.
want
We don't
them
want to
to,
stand by side. Yeah.
yes, we want them to go and be the rescuer. Yes,
Yes.
so we can have uh, early rescuers also. We can include them as SPs and SP trainers, especially the ones who are motivated out there. So yes, Raj. So now that we know a little bit about what are those terminologies, now I'm going to use. Uh, in our Indian context, we very left and right we use skill stations. We
Mm.
need skill stations for the OSCEs and for exam stations, for teaching stations, and mostly it's procedural skills. So when I talk about skill stations, I'll just complete two terminologies. We are using a task trainer and we're having a skill station. I'm not going to go into any teaching methodology here, but we are teaching, we are assessing, and we are giving feedback over here. So
Mm.
as a
Mm.
learner, I will come to you to learn maybe probably a suturing procedure at the skill station which you have prepared, and you have a checklist and you are signing off that I've done all the steps you require. At some steps I'm not doing it properly, and you give me timely, immediate, specific feedback so that I reach up to the benchmark which you have set for me as your learning goal of that station. So that is roughly about skill station. But to enhance the realism of skill stations, what uh, we normally do and we prefer doing is give them a scenario and make it flow. Maybe we at the facilitator or the instructor will be the voice of that patient, where they can take consent or they can explain the procedure for us. So it's nice to have your skill station with a little bit of scenario and make it a scenario based skill station. So that's from my end about skill station. And we have on the other end a proper immersive simulation scenario, Raj.
Mm. Yes, ma'am. So, an immersive simulation scenario is more likely directed towards a team training event. It's not
Yes.
towards one person mastering a skill. It's not skill mastery per se. It's not the cognitive domain. It's not the psychomotor domain. It's a combination of all the domains put together and more of a team training, more of crisis resource management and things like that, which again is a new terminology. We will talk about that.
Yeah, so if I can just add on to that, Raj, just simplifying what you said. So in a skill station, an individual is learning some procedural skill mostly, but obviously he needs to have the knowledge part of what he's doing. And if you add it as a hybrid simulation, he can also emote and converse. So we can also teach communication. But in a simulation scenario, very rightly said by you, we are putting up a scenario just like a real clinical environment. Where it is more, we are concentrating on team training, as you said, crisis resource management. So, if there's a critical incident, there are so many factors factors involved, which we generalize into, say, human factors, which are involved, which will affect our decision making and our clinical reasoning. So it's basically we are put on the spot in our real, which happens every day in our clinics. So we get incidents which are very crucial. If we don't take good decisions, it may affect patient safety, and we need our resources, whether it's equipment, whether it's human or the other team members, and a lot of things are involved in that. And I really like the way you put it, like, simulation scenario is more of a team training and a higher order thinking skill. Raj, back
Yeah,
to you.
ma'am. So, ma'am, before we go to the other topic, I
Mhm.
also want to talk about some controversies within the simulation community about the terms we are talking about,
Okay.
right? Especially SP. And
Okay.
I recently read a LinkedIn post where
Hmm.
someone pointed out that using the verb using SP,
Hmm.
uh, because SPs are also humans, it
Yes.
sounds very objective that I'm using them for my needs,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So they rather you prefer that we say working with SPs or engaging SPs,
Yes.
employing SPs, facilitating sessions involving SPs, and
Yeah.
not use the term using.
Oh, thanks, Raj, because that's again coming to the ethics of
Yes,
our simulation. So I really like that. Thanks for bringing it up. And it's a new learning for me that, even because even I have used, let's use an SP for this scenario.
yes,
And now
exactly.
I will, very consciously avoid that word use SP because we don't want to use human beings. Let's engage with the SPs, or which is the other
Work with
simpler
work
word,
with SP,
work with.
employing SP.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yes, so let's
yeah,
work with SPs for this particular scenario. Thanks, Raj. This is the best part of the podcast for me today.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
ma'am,
this,
now I have to ask:
yes.
standardized versus simulated versus confederate terms which you're not using anymore. What do you
Yeah.
think?
So I wouldn't want to put in anything, but because I'm sitting in India, I can always say one side is the US and one side is the Australia. If we take two continents, okay. Mainly in US and Canada, the word standardized patients are used, okay. And why? Because they wanted to standardize the signs and symptoms of these patients, or these actors, because they are doing high stakes exam. But the other perspective is no human being can be standardized. No patient is like the other patient. So the more preferred term would be simulated patient. And I'm very sorry, but again a little biased towards the SP rather than the standardized patient. But
Hmm.
yes, when you're doing high stakes exam where you and me are giving an exam which our degree is dependent on, we need to be exposed to the same environment. And so this actor or a real patient who is going to be assessed by us should give us the same signs and symptoms or the details, so that you and me are exposed to the same environment, so that we can be assessed by our facilitators, keeping everything
Objective.
standardized. Yeah, so to make it more objective. But again, that's a different discussion of assessment being objective, and
Mm.
a little bit of subjectivity is actually required in assessment.
Mm.
That's a totally different discussion, Raj. So this discussion we have on the fly, okay,
Yeah.
and I really like it because you are an on the fly person. So
Yeah.
what do you mean when I say on the
Oh
fly?
God, here it is. Okay. So let me give an analogy to explain. Imagine you're planning a trip, right?
Yes.
You'll have the one side of your family member who's extremely to the dot planned. This hour we're going to this place. This hour we're catching the bus. This hour we're having our breakfast. Now that's a planned simulation. That's a completely programmed simulation is what we call it, right? And I know our mentor, Dr. Dinkapai, is a very big fan of program simulation. Now, me on the other hand, I'm an emergency physician. I have a problematic condition there. I'm a cowboy of sorts. So what I do is I go on the trip and I decide, you know what, we'll talk to the locals. We'll see what the field is. We'll see what the culture is. We'll see what the weather is, and then decide where we're going. Now that's on the fly simulation. You change the vitals of the mannequin. You change the elements of the simulation depending on how the students respond, and it's not programmed. So there is a bit of a wild side to it. It can take you anywhere, and it does digress from the learning objectives, which is very important to point out.
Hmm.
It might lead to negative outcomes from the student side as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, there are two ways of doing simulation
Yeah, yeah.
essentially. Two schools of thought. One is programmed simulation, and one is on the fly.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. Because what we are discussing here might not be very palatable or,
Mm.
agreed about by a lot of experts in the simulation field. But we are just discussing our perspectives based on the little experience we have had within our context. So I really like that our podcast should have both sides of perspective and discussion rather than being very rigid and crude about certain terminologies, especially within our culture set. And that's why I need to discuss on the next word, which is fidelity, because this is, many school of thoughts, and very rightly, the word is being obsolete now, the word fidelity. So, to our non healthcare audience, fidelity has nothing to do with infidelity.
Of course.
Fidelity in simulation education is how close you are to making things real for your learners to achieve their learning outcome. So how close to you are to the realism, and it is a very multidimensional concept when we talk about fidelity. So earlier literature, and why I want our people to know and listen to the word fidelity is because the literature out there, especially very seminal literatures which we kind of follow, had the word fidelity. So unless they understand the concept of fidelity, we cannot do away with that word. So the fidelity, the main primary thing about fidelity is how close you are to realism. Is one is physical. There are a lot of terminologies: physical fidelity, environmental fidelity, conceptual fidelity. I can just go on: psychological fidelity, sociocultural fidelity, and it can just go on to those who are interested in reading. But the three primary thing is, how close does your environment or your equipment or your physical attributes resemble your healthcare or clinical environment? That is the physical. We come to psychological fidelity. Now, you and me, both the instructor and the learner, we both know this is not real. We know this mannequin is just a plastic product. We know it's not a real patient. But if we are able to, during our pre-brief, orient them to this and have a dialogue on the purpose of the simulation, we are able to create an environment where you and me have a fiction contract that we both know it's not real, but we've come here to learn. So we are going to believe that this is a real environment and a real patient, and I'm going to act as though I would have acted in a real environment. And the psychological fidelity, because of me, the instructor who has designed the scenario, I want you to bring out the emotions as you would in a real time environment. In the sense, if you are in a casualty and you actually have the emotions of anxiety or stress, or how you are giving your emoting with the rest of the audience, so that psychological realism, how you would have been in your environment, real casualty, I want to bring that out in my clear simulated environment. So that's the psychological fidelity we want, and that's very key to the success of a simulation scenario in achieving the learner outcome. And that brings me to the next fidelity concept, where we have the fidelity of physical, psychological, and we also have about the conceptual fidelity. Now we want things to happen to our mannequin or our simulated patient as it would actually happen in a real disease condition in the clinical environment. And that conceptual fidelity is, we need subject matter experts for that. So
Mm.
if an obstetric case should go on in that way, I need my obstetrician to give me the conceptual fidelity for that. So these are the three basic fidelity. But when we talk about equipment, a simulator with full electronics can be a really high fidelity simulator, but it need not have a high fidelity simulation experience for my learner. Raj, I
Yeah,
need
ma'am.
you to pitch in here.
So, ma'am, before I go into that, I also wanted to echo your points on psychological fidelity. because my whole belief in simulation comes from this concept called eustress. EUSTRESS. It's actually a word. People only know distress, right?
Yes.
We're always stressed out. So,
Okay.
and this distress especially happens when you're trying to teach something on the bedside, a clinical skill or intubation or some life-saving skill on the bedside on a patient. There's a lot of stress associated with it because the consequences of a mistake are huge. The patient could potentially die. It's not safe for the patient.
Mhm.
But through simulation, we can mimic this stress without the same consequences. We can create a stressful environment, but the consequences are the mannequin maybe switching off and turning on again, which can be done a number of times, right? And which again brings us to the concept of simulation being a much more safe space. So, psychological simulation, psychological fidelity, it mimics stress, but at a very U level, EUSTRESS, stress level, not at a distress level. So it's a very important factor, and
Yeah.
uh, it is defined by this curve called the Yerkes-Dodson curve. Again, it's a educational concept. I don't want to digress into that again, but YERKES, Dodson, DODGSON. Whoever is interested, you can look it up. It's a very interesting concept.
Thank you, Raj. So
I'm
to
coming back to your question. I'm sorry, I missed the last part.
yeah,
What is your question
no,
again?
yeah. So to simplify on what you said, it's literally like I am pushing you towards the edge of the cliff because I'm
Mm-hmm.
challenging you to learn. At
Mm-hmm.
the same time, I, as a facilitator, should balance out that I don't push you down and you fall off the cliff. And that is
Yeah,
not very easy. Only a trained facilitator designing the
can do that.
scenario and guiding the scenario can do. We need to challenge our learners, but not, stress them to an
Yeah.
extent that they fall off, according to your curve. Yes, thanks, Raj, for that. And
And the edge of the curve, the edge of the cliff is not exactly a cliff. It's only one stair. So if they fall, it's just
yeah,
a stair. Yeah.
yeah, and we are there to hold them down. That is why
Yes.
simulation is a psychologically safe environment. So where we make sure that not just the patients are safe, but our learners are also safe. And my last question to you was about, talking about really high fidelity simulator with all
Hmm.
electronics and gadgets and all that may not
Hmm.
necessarily have a, high fidelity experience, a simulation
Yeah.
experience, or a high fidelity scenario for our learners. So, any experience you want to share just to add in a little more light to that statement?
Yes, ma'am. So uh, my work with high fidelity simulation has been pretty deep because most of my sim centers have had high fidelity simulators,
Mhm,
and the more I work with them, the more I realize they cannot be really dependent upon because they tend to fail on you.
mhm.
Right? There's a whole lot of pre-brief and setup involved for a high fidelity simulator or a high tech simulator, I'm sorry, compared to a low tech simulator.
And yeah, and this is where I just want to add the word dry run, Raj, because you
Yeah,
always remember we are when we are dealing with high tech simulators, dry run, dry run, dry run, dry
try
run.
run. Absolutely. Alpha
Okay.
run, beta run, and delta run.
Yeah. So
Yes. Yeah.
for the non-healthcare audience and even the healthcare audience, dry run is nothing but a rehearsal of what you're planning to give your students. That's it. We are testing it on ourselves. We are testing it again and again so that it plays out properly. But
Sure.
despite that, Raj, tell me your experience.
It's been a mixed bag. I really love the high tech mannequins because the technology really attracts me. It's fun to play with. But when a student does come there, bringing him into the environment, the environmental realism is tough to achieve because they see a talking, walking, a talking, mimicking robot. And it's very tough for them to get out of that phase and believe that the mannequin is real. So the the suspension of disbelief, which we call, we tell them, please believe that this is real. It is tough to achieve through a high tech mannequin, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I hope no industry partners are actually listening to this, Raj.
Oh my God,
But
I can
yes.
already imagine Lateral calling me. So, yeah.
Yeah, so again, whether any industry partners, especially because you mentioned Ladal, they do have mid techs and mid fidelity and low tech and low fidelity. Each simulator has its own place in the context because the fidelity of the equipment or the simulator you're using actually depends on which is your level of learner and what are your learning objectives and the cost effectiveness of your running that scenario within the budget you have, so
Mm.
and the outcome expected. So it's a dynamic decision that needs to be taken with all stakeholders. So that is why we won't be going into, because there is a place for high tech simulators, or really complex
Yeah.
simulators in our healthcare, which are really giving us good work in the critical scenarios.
Yeah.
So with that,
Yeah.
I think we won't go much deep into that. But I think
Yeah.
I'd like to take the last few minutes, Raj, because you talked on technology.
Yeah.
Just throw out some words which is again always very new to me, how much ever I read about it.
Ma'am, which words are you talking about?
I'm talking about technology where VR, MR, XR,
Okay.
AR,
Okay.
okay, and
Got it.
and all the R's for me are Rajkumar.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh God. Oh God.
So let's go to all the R's.
Okay. Okay. This is going to take a while. I'll try to simplify it though, because that's the goal of the whole podcast. So, let's talk about the word mixed reality first, because that's the most easiest to talk about, because mixed reality is a big umbrella. It's an umbrella of terms to talk about technology which adds to realism. That's as simple as that. But these devices are usually display based. That display could be on a screen, or the display could be on your eyes. It's as simple as that. So mixed reality, two arms, both are display based. One display is through a digital screen on your palm, or on your hand, or on the screen in front of you. And the second display is through another screen which is in front of your eyes. If it is in front of your eyes, it's virtual reality. If it's on a device in a screen in front of you, it's augmented reality. It's as simple as that. Now, in your eyes, if you're completely immersed in the space and you cannot see the room around you once you wear the device, that's full virtual reality. Whereas if the device is translucent or transparent and you can see digital stuff, virtual stuff, and also the room you're standing in, the devices in front of you, the people in front of you, that's extended reality. And that's the whole of it. So, mixed reality is an
Okay.
umbrella term. You have augmented, and you have virtual reality, and you have extended reality. That's it, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Thanks, Raj. So, if I'm just trying to simplify it, because many dental surgeons and neurosurgeons and
Mhm.
all, they keep asking me about AR and augmented, and how the simulation, mostly the surgical specialty. So, the simpler way which I try to explain to them, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is you have the hardware in front of you, and you are actually wearing your head mounted device, and you are seeing some digital image superimposed on this hardware, is the augmented reality. Did I
Uh,
understand correctly?
no, ma'am. So
Yeah.
let me correct you that. What you're talking about is extended reality,
Okay.
XR devices. Augmented
Okay.
reality is through your phone screen itself. So your phone camera
Mm-hmm.
takes in the room, and
Mm-hmm.
your phone screen adds in digital elements through the camera
Oh,
lens.
okay.
That's augmented reality.
Okay. So, but the many of the surgeons prefer this augmented reality, right?
Not entirely, ma'am. So the surgeons prefer the extended reality, but we often misuse the term augmented extended reality. What they're using
Oh.
is extended reality. They use HoloLens or
Mm-hmm.
devices like Google XR and Samsung XR and Apple Vision Pro. These are all extended reality devices. These are all XR
Mm-hmm.
devices. So even
Okay.
though they use the term augmented reality mixedly, they're actually talking about extended reality, XR.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
So,
augmented reality essentially is there's a screen in front of you, in not in front of your eyes, but in your
mm-hmm.
hands,
Mm-hmm.
and you're holding that screen, and that
Mm-hmm.
screen amplifies the image it sees through the
Mm-hmm.
camera and adds in digital elements.
Okay. Okay.
Like, let me give you a better example. Now, imagine you go to Amazon and you're shopping, and Amazon says, do you want to see this image in your surroundings, in your place? You can take a picture of the product and you can make it appear in your room. That's augmented reality. Imagine you go to Lenskart and you're trying new glasses on, and Lenskart says, take a selfie, we'll put the glasses on your face, and we'll make it look like it's you wearing the new glasses. That's augmented reality too. But even from my understanding, the definition of augmented reality extends beyond these screens to these heads up displays where the image comes on in front of your eyes. The basic crux of is the augmented reality images cannot be interacted with. They just exist. You can't control them, you can't manipulate them. Whereas in extended reality and in mixed reality, you're able to control and manipulate them. So that's augmented reality. Augmented reality augments your reality by adding elements to it digitally. It could be on a physical mobile screen, or it could be in front of your eyes using a heads up display. That's about it, man.
Okay.
That's augmented reality.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I think I've got a small picture, and I think for my sake, we have to do a podcast on that. But
Yep.
just to conclude on all this technology you were talking about, is this called, serious games or gamification, what we are talking in healthcare?
It could be a part of it as
Uh-huh.
part of the realism to add more realism to it, but no, they're
Okay.
entirely different concepts.
Okay.
Shall we reserve it for part two, ma'am? Because we're
I think
almost
so.
running out of time,
Yeah,
and
I
I
think
want to
so.
do a quick recap of the terms we talked about today too.
Yes, yes. And I think we need to touch upon AI also. So, Raj,
Mm,
we are going next into the technology unless
mm,
somebody gives a feedback and like, no, please stick to, the basics and before you go to the
exactly.
technology. So,
Yeah.
anyway, this was a very nice discussion, Raj. I learned a lot actually today. Okay. And
Mm,
my favorite part is I will not use SPs anymore. I will
mm.
work with the SPs. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So
Yes.
over to you, Raj, for the recap.
So, what did we talk about first? We talked about task trainers first, and then we spoke about mannequins and how they're defined. We also spoke about moulage. We spoke about hybrid simulation. And, ma'am, what am I missing here? After hybrid
Yeah.
simulation?
Yes, we talked about skill station, simulation
Mm.
scenario, moulage, and
On
we
the
talked
fly,
about on the fly. Yes, and we talked about dry run and fiction contract and
fidelity.
fidelity.
Yes.
Yes, and a little bit on the whole extended reality with Raj, which I
Mm.
think we need a different podcast on that. So I
Yeah.
think that comes brings us to the end of today's podcast, Raj.
Yes, ma'am. That's about it. It's been a day. It's been an episode. Thank you all for logging in, and thank you all for pushing us on this direction.
And please do not forget to click like, share, and subscribe to Simple Raj and Simply Lulu.
Ma'am, if I may point out, second
Yes.
episode we're finishing in one take.
Oh,
Yes,
yes. Yes. And like you, and just like like it on the fly.
on the fly, on the fly. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Thanks so much, Raj. So, to our audience, we will meet you in the next following week on a Sunday. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, ma'am. Yep.
Yeah. Bye.